I'm fine.
Bible class is on the computer. Church is on the computer and at the building.
Oh, okay. What's the matter?
I don't want you sitting there like that because everybody can see.
Don't let me have to beat you.
Linda, don't you hurt John.
What?
She told me not to hurt you. She heard what I said. I forgot I had that on.
That's why you need to make sure you're unmuted, or that you're
Yeah.
on mute before you do that.
That's right.
Morning, Jim. Good morning, Royce.
Good morning, folks.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jim. Where's Jan?
Good morning, Donna.
Good morning, Royce.
She's grabbing her coffee.
Oh, okay.
Good morning, Roy. How are you?
I'm magnificent this morning.
That's wonderful to hear. Crowd looks a little thin this morning.
I was gonna say hi to Terry.
Well, it does at
Probably
the
more and more
beginning, doesn't
folks
it?
going in.
They're on there. Yeah.
Hi, Terry
Morning,
and
Warner.
Karen.
Good morning.
Morning, morning.
Good morning. Let's see.
How was attendance in the building last week?
What?
Does anybody know the attendance of the building last week? Or?
I don't know. Probably is on in the bulletin,
I haven't
but I
seen
don't
it.
remember what it said. I looked at it.
Larry, are you home now?
Yes, ma'am. We got home yesterday about 1 o'clock, sometime a little after 1.
Oh, good. Did you have a nice
Got unloaded
trip?
and all. Yeah, we had a good time, being with the kids and stuff, and then working down at the farm to do some things. And
Let's put them together.
well, we had a good time.
Good.
You bringing the rain back with you?
No, as a matter of fact, we didn't have, after we'd been down there for a while, we didn't have much down there neither.
Good morning, Sylvia.
Before you ordered the chair.
Ooh, Sylvia, I like your hair.
Good morning, Sylvia. I don't think she's hooked up yet.
But I was gonna say, I don't think her audio's on.
No, I don't think so either.
But I like her haircut.
It's wonderful on her.
Yeah, it is cute.
Teresa,
Yeah.
you need to bring Jerry over to see my doors. I got them all done.
Oh, okay.
Congratulations, that's a project.
Yeah, it was. It took me a while to get them done, sanding and putting kilts on them and then painting them. I decided I'm old. I don't know how much more I can do.
Did you end
I
up
think
doing
we're
the
all
front door?
feeling that way.
What?
I think
Did you
we're
end up
all,
doing the,
excuse me, go ahead, Teresa.
oh, I was just gonna ask her if she did her front door.
No, I decided to leave the inside black because it goes with the trim on my furniture and my entertainment center. But
Oh, okay.
everything else is painted white.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I've
well,
got
we've
all, I stripped and restained all the cupboards, the vanities, and now the doors are done. So I'm
Yeah.
running out of
That is
things
a
to
project.
do. Yeah.
I see at 10:30.
We're gonna have to stay there now.
I know. Yeah. And I got a new garage door. The kids wanted me to paint it, and I said, no, it's staying the color it is. I am not painting it. So,
In Sunday school.
Well, we
But yes.
planned on taking a little ride today, so we might stop by. I'll call
Will
you if we
do.
do.
oh, will do, please. I'm home.
For
Okay.
those that
Want to go, yes. Or they can still see it here on Zoom, honey.
Good morning, Linda.
Good morning, Donna. How are you this morning?
I am fine. You doing okay besides fussing with poor John?
I have to watch my mouth, I guess, or turn off my machine.
I was just about to call you when one of the girls said something to you. I thought I better call her and tell her she's on.
I think Jerry told me pretty good. Oh,
What we do behind closed doors.
that's true, and mine are closed.
Hey, Linda,
Yes.
I wanted to thank you for calling me. That meant a lot.
Well, you're quite welcome. I just miss seeing y'all.
Well, I miss seeing you guys too.
How's
But guess
Steve
what?
doing?
Oh, not very well.
Not good, sorry.
It got new pain and on top of the old pain, so he's really struggling.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me too.
And how are you doing, Sylvia?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Got a good report on the colonoscopy, so hopefully I won't ever have to have one again.
That's what I said when I had my last one.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm hoping. Depends on if I stay symptomless. So hoping for that.
Good morning, Velvet.
Good morning. Sylvia,
Thank you
we
for
were
the
saying
sweet
how much we
card.
like your haircut.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Gloria.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing just.
How is everybody?
Are you all right? How are you guys?
We're doing great. Great.
Morning, Shay. Are you all ready to move to Oklahoma?
Yeah, we're at Leo's sister's house right now. We'll be here for a few weeks, doing online school and waiting for the Tulsa house to be ready. We'll know more tomorrow.
Good.
Yeah, about what our sellers are going to agree to.
What part of
Have
Tulsa
fun.
do you live in?
It's like the Broken Arrow area, so south of Tulsa.
Yeah, know it well.
Did you get the lawnmower back, Dick?
Not yet. I checked last Wednesday, and they were still working on it, I guess.
Do I need to go run a hay baler?
I thought about hiring a baling crew, but Roger went over Friday, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Dick, do you know what a hay baler is?
Sure he does.
You better believe it. Oh.
Matter of fact, I
had wheat farm out in western Nebraska. Does that answer your question?
Yep. They were doing a lot of baling hay back in Arkansas right now.
Yeah.
Are they going to get their typical 50 inches of rain a year, Larry?
I doubt it. I doubt it this year. Matter of fact, they said they're low.
Wow.
I hear the bell.
You too.
Bells are ringing.
One more to go. If I stop it, then it doesn't start. It won't start again. And if I mute it, it doesn't start. It quits. Temperamental.
Just like me.
Mute.
Okay, we ready to get started?
Yes.
All right. Please mute unless you have a comment to make. All right, so this is the, I guess, third lesson on the latter reign of King David, and title of this lesson is "The Sword Shall Never Depart." As you remember last week, the Lord had sent Nathan to David because the Lord was displeased with what David had done. And we find out the Lord is particularly displeased with what he did to Uriah. He had killed him with the sword of the Ammonites, and then he had taken Uriah's wife to be his own. And then Nathan gives David the Lord's, what the Lord's going to do to David. And it's interesting, Nathan comes to him with a parable, and in this parable, David actually pronounces his own sentence. He said that the man who did this, the rich man who took the poor man's lamb, he deserves to die, and that he needs to restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing. And we're going to find out, well, David doesn't have to die, but the fourfold thing, he will be liable to the fourfold restoration. Nathan tells David that the Lord has taken away his sin and that he is not going to die, even though he deserves to die. There's a passage in Deuteronomy that cursed is the man who kills his neighbor in secret. And also, thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil or calamity against you out of your own house. So all of this bad things is going to come out of David's house. It won't be from outside forces here. But the first one, the first of the four sons that he does lose, the Lord actually takes the life of this boy. He became sick immediately after birth, and on the seventh day, the child died. So that's the first of the four sons, the first of the fourfold that David will have to repay. So now he will lose 3 additional sons. So here's the first son right here. He, let's see, back on red here. He dies at 7 days. He's not circumcised, and he doesn't even get a name as far as we know. The second son then will be Amnon, who is David's oldest son now. And then the third would be Absalom, and the fourth would be Adonijah. So David will lose 4 sons, but each of the sons has a different mother. Of course, Bathsheba for the child that dies. The second son is the son of Ahinoam and David. The third son is Maacah and David, and the fourth son, Adonijah, will be Haggith and David. And I don't know, mercifully for David, the fourth son will not die until after David himself has died. So lose 3 additional sons. And one of the spooky things here, or strange things here, is that just as David took Bathsheba, who was forbidden to him because she was a married woman, forbidden women will also play a part in the deaths of these sons. And none of this is consensual on their part. They were all victims in the role that they played. And another interesting thing is that the women are members of David's house, and keeping what the Lord said, all this is going to come out of your house. And the people who kill the 3 sons will also be members of David's house. So 3 sons, David's house. The women who are victims, David's house. the people who kill the three sons or order their death, David's house. So all of this comes out of David's house. So let's begin. Go to 2 Samuel 13. Amnon and Tamar, the evil begins. So Amnon, son of David, the oldest son, so he is the heir presumptive. He is assumed to be the next king after David dies. The woman here, the forbidden woman, is Tamar, who is the half sister to Amnon, and she is David's daughter. And she is the full sister of Absalom. And Amnon's death is ordered by Absalom, and Absalom is David's son. So here we have David's son Amnon, David's daughter Tamar, David's son Absalom. So you see here, this is all David's household here. So now Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and she was likely named after Judah's daughter-in-law. We had this class, the second class of the quarter, I believe, and so she is someone in the line of David. She was the mother of Perez, and Perez was an ancestor of David. And after a time, Amnon, David's son, loved her. And we're not talking about agape love here. We're talking about the eros love. You know, he wanted her. And Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. I was wondering, what does that mean? I went to some other versions here, and a New Living Translation says, you know, he couldn't have her. I like the CEV, the Common English Version. It seemed impossible for Amnon to be alone with her. As a virgin daughter of the king, she would have been well guarded, and it would have been hard for anyone to be alone with her, for any man to be alone with her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, and he was a crafty man. Now, of course, Amnon was David's son. Now, this Jonadab, who gives Amnon some bad advice, he is Amnon's cousin, and he is a nephew of David. So again, this is all in David's house. He was a crafty man, and he tells Amnon, "O son of the king, why are you so haggard morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" And Amnon says, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." Now, if he was a good friend, he would try to talk him out of this, because of course, what he wants to do is against Levitical law. Jonadab says to him, you know, he's got a plan. Pretend you're sick. Lie down in your bed, pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, "Let my sister Tamar come and give me bread to eat and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand." So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said to the king, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." Eat from her hand. Remember last week, the parable talked about the lamb who ate from the hand of her master. Now, the word here, cakes, here, there's a note in the Bible or in commentaries that this is only used once, this word, and it was believed to be a special bread that when people were sick, they ate it. This was sort of the bread equivalent, say, of chicken soup. When you're sick, you eat this bread. So David sent home to Tamar and said, "Go into your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him." So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house. So sort of the sad thing about this, the bad thing that happens to Tamar, David was the one who sent her there. So she took dough and kneaded it and made cakes in his sight and baked cakes. So even though this woman was a princess, she knew how to bake. And she took the pan and emptied it out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, send out everyone from me." So everyone went out from him. So now Amnon has his wish. He has his sister alone with him in his house. Then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the chamber that I may eat from your hands. So he's getting her even more alone, away from his servants. And Tamar took the cake she had made and brought him into the chamber to Amnon, her brother. And when she brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said to her, come lie with me. Come lie with me. Reminds you a little bit of Potiphar's wife here speaking to Joseph. Come lie with me, my sister. This is certainly not something that a good person would say to their sister. She answered him, no, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Of course, a brother and a sister or half-sister were not allowed to lie together under a Levitical law. Do not do this outrageous thing. As for me, where could I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the outrageous fools in Israel. You know, you'd be a laughing stock. And the word here for fool, the Hebrew word for fool is Nabal. Remember the story of Nabal and Abigail, and it's mentioned that his name meant fool. And that's the word here, Nabal. Now, therefore, please speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. I'm not so sure about this. She was just desperate to do anything to get out of this situation. She was scared, but he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she. So you get the idea of not only does he take her, he uses physical force to take her. He violated her and he lay with her. So here's that command in Deuteronomy. Last week we had, cursed be anyone who kills his neighbor in secret. So this week, cursed be anyone who lies with his sister, whether the daughter of his father, certainly this is the case with Tamar, or the daughter of his mother, and all the people shall say amen. So anyone who does this is cursed. So is Amnon now cursed? And, what does it mean to be cursed? There's nothing here about, you shall stone this person, but you shall be cursed. Now, ordinarily, if she wasn't related to him, then taking a virgin, he would be required to marry her, pay her father an extra bride price, and never be allowed to divorce her. But she was his sister, and she was the daughter of the king. So those are different situations. Then Amnon hated her with a great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, get up, go. But she said, no, my brother, for this is wrong, and sending me away is greater than the other that you did to me. But he would not listen to her. So apparently she thinks, now that you've done this, we need to get married, because basically you shamed me. You're going to ruin me as a potential bride for any person. But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, put this woman out of my presence, bolt the door. Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves. This is the same word in Hebrew as the coat of many colors that Joseph had. For thus were the virgin daughters of the king dressed. So his servant put her out and bolted the door. So essentially he kicked her out after this. And Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she wore. Ashes. Normally ashes and sackcloth. She didn't have sackcloth, so she tore that long robe. And this was a sign of really sad mourning on her part. She laid her hand on her head and went away, crying aloud as she went. And her brother Absalom said to her, has Amnon, your brother, been with you? Now hold your peace, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this to heart. Do not take this to heart. I said, really? This poor girl, in a sense, she was sent to her brother, who she thought was sick, and her father sends her, and then he takes hold of her and violently rapes her. And then Absalom says, hold your peace. I don't think he would make a good rape counselor. So Tamar lived a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's house. When King David heard of all these things, he was very angry, but Absalom spoke to Amnon neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister Tamar. So again, there's just some strong feelings here. This innocent woman, this has happened to her and probably just ruined her life. So Amnon hates his sister Tamar, who he had loved earlier with a great passion. What's that? Somebody say something?
There's an echo, Warner.
Okay. So Amnon hates Tamar, and okay, well, you're going to get the lesson twice, I guess. David is very angry, and Absalom hates Amnon, his brother, and Tamar, she feels violated, betrayed. You know, her father sent her to this, and then desolate, you know, the rest of her life, she doesn't have a good future now. So the Septuagint version has a little bit different reading on this about David's anger here. And King David heard all these things, and he was very wrathful, but he did not punish the spirit of Amnon, his son, because he loved him, because he was his firstborn. And this also almost reminds me of Jacob when his daughter Dinah is raped, and he was angry, but he doesn't really do anything. So Dinah's two brothers, Levi and Simeon, take vengeance upon the people. So let's do a comparison between Bathsheba and Tamar. Tamar, she was beautiful. Amnon desires her. She was forbidden. She was his half sister. She was not allowed under the law of Moses. It's interesting. Abraham and Sarah were half brother and half sister, but that was before the law. Once Deuteronomy, Leviticus, that relationship was no longer permitted. David was the one who sends her to Amnon. Tamar comes to Amnon. Amnon takes hold of Tamar and asks her to lie with him. She resists, pleads he not violate her, but Amnon violates her anyway, and it's indicated that he does that through strength, through just force. And then Amnon lays with her. So that's Tamar. So let's look at Bathsheba here. Tamar was beautiful. Bathsheba described as very beautiful. Amnon desires her. David desires Bathsheba. He sends messengers to find who is this woman. She's his half sister, and of course, Amnon knows this. Then David finds out that she's married, so she's forbidden. David sends Tamar to Amnon. David sends for Bathsheba. Tamar comes to Amnon. Bathsheba comes to David. And then these right in here, we really don't have anything. And then Amnon lays with her, and then David lays with her. So we have some information here that is missing from the account with Bathsheba. And you wonder, why is that missing? David is revered, perhaps the author of Samuel. We don't know who the author is. He's willing to lay this at the account of Amnon, information that maybe he doesn't want to put on David here. So is what happened to Tamar an allusion or echo back to what happened to Bathsheba? So could something similar be in this area here? But one thing is different here is that with Tamar, after Amnon lays with her and takes her, Tamar does not want to leave. But in the case of Bathsheba, the scripture says that after David lays with her, she left on her own volition and goes to her house. So the death of Amnon. So 2 years later, it's taken a while for Absalom to get his revenge here. Absalom had sheep shearers, which is near Ephraim, and he invites all his brothers, the king's son. Absalom comes to the king, and he tells him about it, and he invites the king. And the king says, no, I don't want to come. I don't want to be a burden to you. But he presses him. So he gives him his blessing to have it, but he doesn't want to go. So he says, if you won't go, please let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said to him, why should he go with you? I thought this unusual. Do the sons of the king have to get permission to go visit another one? Amnon had to get the king's permission to get Tamar to come to visit him. So the king says, why should he go? Maybe he's suspicious, but Absalom pressed him until he let Amnon and all the king's sons go. So David, again, he sent Tamar to a bad situation, and now he's going to send Amnon to a bad situation. Then Absalom commanded his servants, mark when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, when he's drunk. And when I say to you, strike Amnon, then kill him. Do not fear. Have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. Remember the word valiant. Earlier it was described that it was valiant men, valiant Ammonites who killed Uriah the Hittite. So valiant men are now going to kill Amnon. So the servants of Absalom did to Amnon as Absalom commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled. Mule and fled. I think once Solomon becomes king, those mules are going to become stallions. But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ahimaud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son day after day. You know, for the earlier son, the infant, he only had to mourn for him for 7 days, but this is going to go on for a long time, much like when Jacob mourned for Joseph. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there for 3 years. So now we're 5 years later. And the spirit of the king longed to go to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. Remember, he was comforted about the infant son once he was dead. Once the infant was dead, he got up, washed, and then ate some food. So here's where he goes down in Jerusalem, and he goes up to Geshur. This is out of the territory of Israel, about 80 miles away. He stays there out of the reach of his father. So now the third son, Absalom, of course, house of David. The women this time, the forbidden women, are David's 10 concubines. Of course, you're not allowed to sleep with a concubine of the king. That sort of indicates that you're trying to usurp power. And then he is killed by Joab, David's commander, but he's also David's nephew. So we got David's son, David's concubines, David's nephew. So again, the house of David will be involved in this. And Joab intercedes for Absalom. Not so much for Absalom as for David. Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, he's a brother of David, knew that the king's heart went out to Absalom. So he's sort of in the same, David is sort of the same situation as Jacob was after he thought that his son was dead. So he's trying to get him over this and realizes the only way he's going to get over this is if Absalom comes back. So he sent to Tekoa, that's the city where the prophet Amos was from, and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning garments. Do not anoint yourself, but behave like a woman who's been mourning for many days, like David is mourning many days. Go to the king and speak to him thus. So David put the words in her mouth. Essentially, the words were, pretend that you are a widow and you have 2 sons. And these 2 sons got in a fight one day, and one of the sons is killed. And now the townsfolk want to charge him with murder and kill her other son. And she's concerned with both of her sons dead. There's going to be no one to take care of her, and she's going to be destitute. So she pleads to the king, David, to spare that other son, so she'll have someone to take care of her. And David says, don't worry, I'll intercede for your son and he will not die. But then David sort of gets suspicious here and he says, now, wait a minute. Did Joab put you up to this? And she confesses, yes, Joab put her up to this. So then he goes to Joab and he says, okay, I'll let Absalom come back. So I grant this, go bring back young Absalom. And Joab fell on the face of the ground and paid homage and blessed the king. And Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord the king, in that the king has granted the request of his servant. So Joab arose and he goes to Geshur, about 80 miles away, and he brings Absalom back. but there's a condition, you know, even though he's back in town, he still can't come and visit the king. And the king said, let him dwell apart in his own house. He is not to come into my presence. So essentially, Absalom is still in exile from the king. He's just a bit closer. So Absalom lived apart in his own house and did not come into the king's presence. Now a little bit of description on Absalom. In all Israel, there was no one as handsome as Absalom. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish on him. When he cut his hair, he used to cut it every year. He weighed the hair of his head 200 shekels by the king's weight. I think that's a couple of pounds of hair. There were born to Absalom 3 sons and 1 daughter whose name was Tamar. She was a beautiful woman. So Absalom names his daughter after his sister. It's kind of unusual here where a person has 3 sons and 1 daughter, and usually they named the 3 sons, but in this case, the 3 sons are not named, the daughter is named. So Absalom lived 2 full years, so we got another 2 years added onto this without coming into the king's presence. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king. He wouldn't come. He sends a second time, he doesn't come. Then he says, go out into Joab's field and burn his barley field. So once he does that, so then Joab does come to find out, why did you do this? Joab arose and went to Absalom at his house and said, why have your servants set my field on fire? Absalom says, behold, I sent you word, come here, that I may send you to the king and ask, why have I come? You know, if you won't see me, it would have been better if I just stayed there. This is worse, me being so close. You know, if I'm guilty, let him put me to death. If not, then let me come to the king. Then Joab went to the king, he told him, and then David summons Absalom. He comes to the king, he bows himself down on the ground and before the king, and then the king kisses Absalom. So apparently they've made up now. Another 4 years go by, and Absalom says to the king, let me go and pay my vow, which I vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I lived in Geshur, in Aram, while he was in exile. If the Lord will indeed bring me back, then I will offer worship to the Lord. The king says to him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron. The importance of Hebron, it does have some significance. Remember, when Saul dies, David doesn't become king right away. One of Saul's sons becomes king, but David is king in Hebron and for about 7.5 years. At the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah, and the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So he's not king of Israel for the full 40 years we're giving credit for, but about 33.5 or so. But he's the first 7.5, he's only king down in Hebron. So it's important here. Absalom is declaring himself king in Hebron, and then that's where earlier David had declared himself king, even though Saul's son was the king in Jerusalem. With Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence. So he brings some guests, and they know nothing about Absalom's plan. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor. Remember, we mentioned him a couple of weeks ago, from his city Gilho. And the conspiracy grew strong, and the people went with Absalom kept increasing. So he sends for Ahithophel, David's counselor, but will he join him? So Absalom is down here in Hebron. Of course, David is king here in Jerusalem, and he sends for Ahithophel and Gillo right here. So he's starting his conspiracy down here. This is as I mentioned, this is where David was first king. And a messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel have gone after Absalom. Then David said to his servants who were with him, arise and let us flee, or else there will be no escape from us for Absalom. So he's really scared for his life now. Go quickly, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down ruin on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. Here's that sword shall not depart. And the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. So here's those forbidden women. The death of Absalom. Now Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. So Ahithophel does join Absalom in the rebellion. Now you'll remember, why would David's trusted counselor do this? Remember that David took his granddaughter, and he killed the husband of his granddaughter. So maybe there's some resentment at what David had done earlier. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give your counsel. What shall we do? Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines, who he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father. Once he does this, you know, there's no turning back. Now, perhaps he could, but after he's done this, there's no forgiveness. He has made an attempt to essentially commit treason now. And the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Remember what Nathan told David, you know, so what you did in secret, the Lord will do under the sun, meaning in the sight of all Israel. So he is doing this on the roof of the king's house. This is the same roof where David went for a walk and watched Bathsheba doing her monthly purification. So the advice that Ahithophel gives to Absalom is essentially, do the same thing that your father did to my granddaughter. Now, in those days, the counsel that Ahithophel gave was as one who consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel, esteemed by both David and by Absalom. So if you wanted to get some advice, Ahithophel at this time was the one you went to. It was the closest thing to getting advice from God. Then David mustered the men who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. And David sent out the army, 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, and Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. So it sounds like there's going to be war here. The king ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders about Absalom. So no, even though Absalom has committed treason, has taken the 10 concubines, David still loves his son and wants him to be merciful to him. So the army went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. And the men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, and the loss there was great on that day. 20,000 men. 20,000 men are now lost. Add that to Uriah the Hittite, to the innocent man who were killed with him. Amnon killed, Absalom's going to be killed. So a lot of people are going to die due to David's indiscretion here with Uriah. The battle spread over the face of the country, and the forest devoured more people that day than the sword. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David. Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak and was suspended between the heaven and the earth, while the mule that was under him went out. So this would almost be a funny situation if it wouldn't be for what's going to happen to Absalom. And a certain man saw it and told Joab, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. Joab said to the man who told him, what, you saw him? Why then did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have been glad to give you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. But the man said to Joab, even if I felt in my hand the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver, I would not reach out my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai for my sake, protect the young man Absalom. So it sounds like this man's got some integrity and he knows what the king said and he's going to obey him. Joab said, I will not waste my time like this with you. He took 3 javelins in his hand and thrust them into the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak. And 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. So why would Joab do this? Joab had gone out on a limb for Absalom. He went there, he got him, he went to the king and tried to get him to come back. He got him to come back, and then once he was in Jerusalem, he advocated for Absalom again to come to the king. And then Absalom burned his field and everything, and he probably feels betrayed by this man, and he doesn't trust him. So that's the end of the 3rd son. Adonijah, the 4th son, of course, he is a son of David's house. The forbidden woman, we talked about her first week, was Abishag, David's concubine, and then he is killed by Solomon, David's son. So we got David's son, David's concubine, and then David's son. Now, King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he couldn't get warm, so they searched throughout the kingdom. They found let a young woman be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be in his service. So essentially, she's going to wait on him and then lie in his arms in the evening so he'll be warm. So they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout the territory. And then they found Abishag, the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful, and she was of service to the king and attended him, but the king knew her not. The king did not have sexual relations with her. So here we have Abishag now, a Shunammite woman, and she's in a dotted line because she's a concubine here. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And certainly you would think that he would be king. He is the 3rd oldest son of David after Amnon and Absalom. So he is the heir presumptive now. So this isn't anything unusual for him to think that he'll be the next king. He prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Now here's an interesting comment. His father David never had at any time displeased him by asking, why have you done thus and so? So he's sort of a hands-off king. He doesn't discipline his sons. Reminds you a little bit of Eli. He was a priest. He was a godly man, but he had horrible sons. Samuel, a godly man. His sons were corrupt judges. And here we have David, and it says, never at any time had he displeased Adonijah or disciplined him about anything you've done. Now, he also was a very handsome man. He was born next to Absalom, so he's the 3rd oldest son. He conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar, the priest. And they followed Adonijah and helped him. But Zadok, now he is the high priest, or maybe he will become the high priest. But after Zadok, the high priestly line will be the Zadok line. Zadokites will be the high priestly line. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and Nathan the prophet, and Shimei and Ray and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. So we got a contingency. One group is with supporting Adonijah, and then there's another group. Both sides have important people that do not support Adonijah. So Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, fattened cattle by the serpent stone, which is beside En Rogel. And he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah, sounding like what Absalom had done earlier. But he did not invite Nathan the prophet or Benaiah or the mighty men or Solomon his brother. So apparently he knows who are not on his side, and he doesn't invite them. Then, so Nathan, who is not on Adonijah's side, comes to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, and then he says, have you heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, has become king, and David our Lord does not know it? You know, David is old at this time, and he doesn't know anything about this. Now, therefore, come, let me give you some advice that you may save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Now, whether that's true or not, but maybe if Adonijah becomes king, he will consider Solomon a threat and have him killed. He says, go in at once to King David and say, do you not, my lord the king, swear to your servants, saying, Solomon your son shall reign after me, and he shall sit on my throne. Now, we have no record of that this earlier happened, but Nathan says it happened. Why then is Adonijah king? Then while you're still speaking with the king, I'll come in after you and confirm the words that you have to say. So Nathan has a plan here on how to get Solomon to be king. King David said, call to me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. So they came before the king. The king says to them, take with me the servants of your Lord, and have Solomon my son ride on my own mule and bring him down to Gihon. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet there anoint him king over all Israel. Then blow the trumpet and say, long live King Solomon. So apparently when someone is proclaimed king and anointed, there are trumpets blown. You shall then come up after him, and he shall come and sit up on my throne, for he shall be king in my place. And I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah. So we actually have a succession of kings while the former king is still alive. So he's going to be, I guess, abdicating and turning things over to Solomon. Then it was told Solomon, behold, Adonijah fears King Solomon. So this is later. Adonijah fears King Solomon. So he has realized that he's not going to become the next king, and Solomon is. And then he's scared for his life because of what he's done. He has laid hold of the horns of the altar, saying, let King Solomon swear to me first that he will not put his servant to death with the sword. And Solomon said, if he will show himself to be a worthy man, not one of his hairs shall fall to the earth, but if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. So Solomon says, you know, his fate rests in his hands. If he's worthy, nothing's going to happen to him. But if wickedness is found in him, he shall die. So King Solomon sent, there's the 2-minute warning. So King Solomon sent, and they brought him down from the altar, and he came and paid homage to the king. And Solomon says, go to your house. So David is dead now. He's buried. And the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. That's counting the 7.5 years in Hebron. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne. His kingdom was firmly established. Then Adonijah gets in trouble. So the son of Haggith, he comes to Bathsheba and he has a request. And she asks, do you come peacefully? And he says, I come in peace. He says, you know that the kingdom was mine and that Israel expected me to reign. You know, I was the next oldest son. However, the kingdom has turned to my brothers, but I do have a request to make. And she says, speak. He says, please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife. Bathsheba said, very well, I will speak to you for the king. Either that she doesn't know or she just, that what he is asking is not permitted. You cannot have a concubine of the previous king. That indicates that you want to take over the throne. So Abishag, even though she's not married, as far as we know, she is forbidden. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf. He comes to the king. The king rose to me. Oh, she comes to the king. He rises to meet her. She says she has a request, and he says, make your request, my mother. I won't refuse you. she said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah, your brother, as his wife. Solomon does not like the request. He says, why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is my older brother, and on his side are Abiathar the priest and Joab. So Solomon realizes, he's the older brother. Now he wants the king's concubine. He has support from Joab and the priest. Death of Adonijah. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, God do to me, and more so, he swears an oath, if this word does not cost Adonijah his life. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of my father, who has made me a house as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he struck him down and he died. So Adonijah, the fourth son, fulfills the prophecy. David is dead at this time, though. So we have David's son, the forbidden woman is Abishag, and then he is killed at the orders of King Solomon, David's son. So that's it. So that's the sword shall never depart. So this is the David fulfilling what he said, that the man shall pay fourfold. So next week will be the census. That's both the latter reign of David, and that's also a difficult passage. We'll look at two accounts of the story, one in 2 Samuel and one in 1 Chronicles. The two accounts have some differences, and we'll try to reconcile those differences. So thank you for your comments. And those of you heading for the building, have a safe trip.
Thanks, Werner.
Thank you, Werner.
You're welcome.
Warner.
Warner.
Thanks, Warner.
Thank you,
You're
Warren.
welcome.
Good
I'm
class, Warner.
Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, be that way.
All right.
I have something I want to show you guys. This is something that you can put inside your face mask that gives space